Okay, so welcome to this live Q&A. This is for anybody that may have any questions about their meditation practices. If you have any questions about your meditation, if you have any concerns or anything about meditation, just throw it in the chat and I will answer it to the best of my ability. I can't promise I will be able to answer everything perfectly, but I've had like well over 12, 13 years of pretty hardcore meditation. So, most likely I will at least be able to help you out. So, until people start asking questions, I've got a list of topics to cover. The first one is one of the viewers was asking about the practice with the wireless speaker that I was talking about in a somewhat recent video. The idea behind that, if you remember a while ago, one of the first energy work videos talks about how to develop the ability to cause tactile feedback. So if you remember, we would, if you saw the video, I recommended getting a feather or a piece of paper or a pen or a nail or whatever, just a few different implements, and kind of drag it along your arm in order to memorize that sensation and then try to reproduce it. So the idea with the wireless, with the speaker, okay, because we had gone through body breathing and creating sensations, full body sensations of the tightening and the expanding. So the idea with the body or with the wireless speaker is to use an app on your phone to generate one second. To generate a pulse, like a sine wave pulse of some specific frequency that you can feel, and use that to basically do the same thing. Try to memorize the sensation and then try to reproduce it throughout your whole body as a vibration, as a frequency. So that's what I was talking about, because we went through body breathing, right, and doing fast breathing, and we went through the whole concept of trying to get as fast as you can like possibly try to conjure that body breath. And there's a point where you just can't do that. You can't go faster. It's physically and mentally impossible to do super rapid body breaths. So the idea with a speaker, because that's what a frequency is. It's a vibration, right? And so the faster you do your body breathing, the more it turns into kind of like a frequency, or it's always a frequency, but the more it turns into something that's not individual breaths, but it's going so fast that it's turned into kind of a vibratory sensation. That's the whole point with a speaker. It's to get a sense, hold the speaker up to your body, hit the tone, whatever frequency you've set it at, and absorb that. Try to memorize what that feels like and then reproduce it. And the point with that is you can do a variety of tones, and get to the point where you can do create the tactile feedback sensation of very low bass sounds, right? That bass of vibratory sensation, and go all the way up to the higher end of really high frequencies that you can feel. So I wasn't trying to confuse anybody with that video. I was just, I may have not been explaining it correctly, but that's the whole point. The point is to be able to cause those vibratory sensations on command, like when you need it, especially when you're attempting to get into that deep void state. I guess, void state. So that's that. If you have any questions about that, let me know in the chat. Next, I thought we could talk about the difference between the mind awake, body asleep void and the more Buddhist actual void state. It seems like that a lot of people have started to use the term void when talking about that well, the mob state, right? Mind awake, body asleep state. There's a point when you've quieted your mind down enough, and your body has fallen asleep before you jump into a lucid dream, or before you jump into what has been termed an out-of-body experience. There's a point where it feels like you are just floating in a void. In some occult forums, people say that this is a point where you can cause, manifest things. I'm not going to speak to that because I don't know. I take this from a very scientific kind of point of view, but the mind awake, body asleep state, that kind of weird little area where you just you feel like you're just kind of floating in nothingness. I think people have started to call it the void because it feels like you're just floating in a void, but that's not the historically, I guess, used. Well, that's not the void state that you hear about from historical accounts, right? From Buddhist literature and from, it's escaping me right now, but that's not they're not the same. So the mob void is, it just feels like you're floating in a void. You can still have thoughts, you can still focus on things, and it's not pure void. What the full-on void state is, when Buddhists talk about entering the void state, this is very close to kind of, I guess, it's not enlightenment, but it's kind of a very close state to that. And what happens with that is you're literally in the void. No thoughts, no sensations. You are a part of the nothingness, I guess is the best way to explain that. Very different level of skill to get from the mob state to actual pure void state. And I just kind of wanted to mention that because it seems like a lot of people have been kind of confused about that a little bit. Yeah, that is that. Give me 1 second. I'm going to check something really fast here. Okay, so next. I had recently put a series up for a series of meditations, 3 meditations. The 3 most powerful meditations is what the series is called. The first video is up, and I've mentioned a few times that I would get some paperwork up or a sheet to help track your first meditation. I've completed the sheet, and I will be putting it up. I think I'm trying to decide whether I want to put it up on my business website or the Creation Tribe website. But just to let you know, I have gotten that up, and maybe I should just print one out really quick so I can kind of walk you through it. And if you guys have any questions, just drop it in the chat. Like, don't, interrupt me, please, if you have something you want to talk about, or if you have a question on your mind. So I'm going to pull that up really quick, and I'll just print it out really fast so I can show it to you. So Fatima says, you mean pure consciousness as nothingness? I have not personally reached enlightenment. I think I'm pretty far away from getting to that point, but I think that kind of is the point. I'm not 100% sure though. I haven't experienced it, but I I think that's the idea. I think it's, everything is stripped away. Thoughts, sensations. You've just stripped all of your ego off. You've stripped your mental machinery off. You've taken all of the bodily sensations, touch, taste, smell, sight, hearing. That all goes away, and you are just existence, and that's it. And I think that's kind of that point where you're right about to tap into enlightenment. You're right about to experience the all, the everything all at once, in all times, in all places, in all realities, and it's just that allness experience. So I think that's kind of the idea. So yes. Okay, let's print this out so I can maybe talk about it. And I'm probably going to do a video on this as well, just so there's a specific video about it. But okay, print. Reach up here and grab it. Okay, so this is the passive observer meditation sheet here. Let's see if you can see this, get it in focus here. Okay, so you have this column here. This is your date column. So that's your date, right? As you go through your practice. And then you have 4 separate columns. Your first meditation, second, third, and fourth. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, it also says session 1. Whoops, I'm gonna have to fix that. So you have your 5 separate sessions. You don't need to do 5 sessions in a day. You can do 1, 2, 3, whatever you want. I recommend at least 2 sessions in a day. Let's see. I can't read that from here. Okay. Xavier, is it Iago or Lago? That's an I, right? Iago's Xavier. He asks, what can you say regarding the usage of psilocybin, LSD, and other entheogens for the purpose of meditation? Entheogens for the purpose of meditation. Okay. I'm a big psychedelic proponent. I think they're an incredible tool, and if used correctly. For the practice of meditation, that's a tough one, and it's because everybody's a little different, and everybody is always in a different state. But let me put it this way. When you decide it's time for you to take a trip and to, clean out some clutter in your head and all that, good stuff, taking LSD, you decide you're going to go on a trip, okay? So it's definitely recommended to meditate while you're tripping. or at least I would recommend that. You, People like to go hiking. That's fine. Go hiking, but also sit down and think through things. Really get into your head, because how they work. I mean, you know how they work, right? It's just stripping away, that outer shell, that the coarse outer layer that you've built over time. And so when you're tripping and your mind has been opened and all these new connections are being made, yeah, that's a great time to meditate. But I wouldn't suggest, how do I say this? I wouldn't suggest using hallucinogens to meditate, but using meditation when you go on a trip. Does that make sense? Like, I wouldn't suggest just thinking that hallucinogens are a key ingredient to achieving certain levels of meditation, because I don't think that's how it works. I think it's kind of the other way around, where you're using the hallucinogens to clean out clutter and to help get over certain things, to straighten your mind out a little bit. And when you do that, you definitely want to use meditation while you're doing that to help heighten that experience, or help that process move along in a healthier manner. Excuse me. So did that answer your question? Okay, cool. Yeah, so any questions, just drop it. I'll stop whatever I'm saying and answer it. Okay, so we've got the 5 meditation sessions, okay? And you'll notice I've made kind of a little cross in each box, okay? There's 4 little boxes per date. So you've got your date, whatever day it is, and then your 4 or 5 sessions, and then each session has 4 little boxes. Okay, so what the boxes are for is, if you remember, or if you saw the video, you want to use click counters, because you're counting the number of thoughts that you've had while you're meditating, and the number of times you have been derailed and got wrapped up in your thoughts. So the point of the first meditation is to be able to just meditate and acknowledge your thoughts as they're coming into your mind, but not engage with them. You want to be the passive observer. You want to just watch the thoughts as they're coming through, but just let them do their thing. Let them, run through their own scenario, but don't engage with them. Don't get wrapped up in it. And you'll notice as you continue to practice this, the number of thoughts will lower. You'll get fewer and fewer and fewer thoughts until you'll have like maybe 1 thought every minute or every 2 minutes. So the 1 click counter is for the thoughts just the thoughts that arise. Okay, every time a new thought arises, oh, that's a thought. Click, click, click. Every time you have a thought. The other click counter is for when you get wrapped up in that thought. When you realize, oh my gosh, I totally got lost in that thought. Whoops. Okay, this is the other click counter. And so the 4 squares helps you track that. So on the bottom, it'll be kind of like a almost like a fraction. Okay, so the 1 column is for the number of thoughts that you've had, and the other column is for the number of times that you've gotten distracted. So you write that down on the bottom. So if I, had 10 thoughts in the space of 5 minutes, I would put 10 on the bottom there, and in the other column, I would write down how many times, or in the other bottom square, I'd write down how many times I got lost, how many times I, got wrapped up in a thought. And then at the end of the meditation, you go back and try to recall as many thoughts as you can. And so in the thoughts column, you would write, you already have 10 thoughts, you recorded that. Now you go back and try to recall how many thoughts can I actually remember through that. and then you write that number down above it. Yeah, so it just gives you kind of like I mean, literally a fraction. I can remember 5 thoughts out of the 10 that I know I had. And it's just a really good way to keep track of that meditation, because the point to where, or when you reach the point where you have over a 10-minute span of time, if you've only had like 10 thoughts, you didn't get distracted at all, and you can remember all of them, that's the point that it's considered that you have mastered that meditation. So this works really well for the first meditation. The second video, I wanted to give some good time before I put the second meditation up, just to give people the chance to master that one, because it's not easy. It's much more difficult than people think. It took me, I'm ADHD, so it probably took me a lot longer than would take the average person. But it took me 3 months or something to master that first meditation. To really master it, to make sure that I didn't get distracted once, regularly, like every single meditation. I had to make sure I wasn't getting distracted at all, and that I only had 5 to 10 thoughts total. So that's that one. I'll get another paper ready for the second meditation, and I'll get that video up probably within the next week or 2 weeks. So we talked about that. Oh, and this is a tricky one. What is a thought? Now, specifically for the passive observer meditation, what does it mean to have a thought? Oh, hold on one second. Okay, so Fatima says, can anyone get into the void state, Buddhist, accidentally, like when sleeping or in some kind of sleep paralysis? I don't know. I wouldn't say it's impossible. I've heard of people having spontaneous enlightenment experiences, like waking up in the middle of the night and just all of a sudden, out of nowhere, just boom, enlightenment. And I've always wondered what would happen if somebody had a spontaneous enlightenment while they were driving down the road. I don't know, but I wouldn't put it past reality for that to be possible. I would for sure think that that's possible. Given that some people, that there have been plenty of reports of spontaneous enlightenment experiences, and so spontaneous void experiences, I'm sure, is just right next door, right? So I totally think that's possible. I don't know of anybody that's gone through that, or I haven't heard of that specifically, but yeah, I see no reason why that would not be possible. Did that answer your question for you? Okay. Okay, so if that didn't answer your question, just let me know. So what is a thought? This is kind of a tricky space, because a lot of times when you're meditating, especially when you're doing something like focusing on your thoughts, well, what do I know? What do I count as a thought? Do I count? If I feel a fly land on my knee. Okay, cool. If I feel a fly landing on my knee, and I draw my attention to that fly, I draw my attention to the sensation of that fly in my knee, is that a thought? If I hear the door slam next door, right, while I'm meditating, does that count as a thought if I recognize that as input into my brain, right? So this is kind of a tricky question, but there's a really subtle difference between your attention, your focus, what you're paying attention to, and what's happening inside of your mind. Okay, a touch on your arm or your shoulder, or a fly landing on your neck, or a sound happening, right, a door closing, or the AC turning on, anything like that. As long as you don't let that convert into a thought, it's not a thought. It's a perception. You're receiving information from your environment, and it can turn into a thought, right? Like if I hear the door close next door, and in my mind I picture the door closing, okay, then it's become a thought. But you can practice dialing that down. You can practice just experiencing the sound, so it doesn't conjure an image. And there's kind of this whole spectrum of crazy that you can go down with this topic. You can get to the point to where somebody could be talking to you, and you're just experiencing the vibrations of their voice coming into your mind and washing over your brain. You're not picking out words. You're not perceiving the meaning of the sentence. You're just experiencing, their voice washing over your consciousness, your awareness, and you're not you basically don't understand it. You're not actually parsing it and understanding the different words and the meaning of the sentence. Difficult, but that's possible. So yeah, perceptions, as long as you don't allow them to just turn into a full-fledged thought, is not a thought. Another thing you'll notice as you start to get really good at not this first meditation, but the third meditation, is vacancy of thought. It's practicing complete void of thought. Not the void meditation, but just no thought. When you get to the third meditation, you'll notice as you are actively keeping thoughts suppressed, and you're actively keeping sounds and things from turning into thoughts, that there is a very subtle awareness of the very beginning of a thought. I call it a thought seed. I don't know what other people call it. I'm sure there's a Buddhist term for this, but it's like, it's everything that the thought is, just compressed and packed into its most minimal basic component, and it arrives from your subconscious, and you can literally sense these thoughts before it comes into your awareness. You can sense them coming up and unfolding and becoming what they are, and the better you get at sensing that, the sooner you can stop them from arriving into your full awareness. And it's really bizarre, because each thought seed is specific to the full-fledged thought that it turns into. But yeah, when you get to that point, those thoughts, or those thought seeds, they're not full thoughts. In fact, they're not even, they're just starting to form. So I wouldn't consider that a thought either, as long as it hasn't fully unfolded and materialized into a full-fledged thought. As long as you can kind of suppress it before it becomes, before it fully arises into your awareness, I wouldn't consider it a thought. I would say you're successful if you just keep it from just sprouting into your mind. it's an interesting kind of place to go when you're trying to think about what a thought is, what actually constitutes a thought. Uh, yeah, but as long as you realize that sensations, things that you're getting from your senses, tastes, smells, whatever, they're not thoughts unless you let them turn into a thought. I mean, the smell of pumpkin pie isn't a thought of pumpkin pie unless you let that develop into a thought of pumpkin pie. So you're good, feeling sensations and hairy things and even seeing those little sparkles and stuff. Oh, this is another one. Um, what are they called? Oh my gosh, I apologize. Hypnagogic hallucinations. Those crazy patterns and shapes and stuff you see while you're falling asleep, just in front of your eyes. That's one I'm not totally sure on yet, because it seems to be an automatic thing. It's not like you're like summoning a thought and creating an image in front of your eyes. It just happens automatically. I as long as you haven't lost, your train of thought, or your haven't lost yourself mentally, as long as you haven't like kind of started to dip into sleep, or losing consciousness to sleep, or wrapped up in another thought, I I would be cautious about calling those thoughts. I don't think they're thoughts, because you can't control them. They're just things that happen, right? Like when you're falling asleep and you hear a, a word spoken next to your head, or you're seeing the little weird things, or you feel something on your body. I don't think those are thoughts. I think those are just things that our brain does sometimes, and it's not anything you have control over. You can't control the patterns, right, that you see when you're falling asleep. So I wouldn't consider those thoughts. But I would say that if you're having hypnagogic hallucinations, that you're probably, as far as this meditation goes, as far as the passive observer meditation goes, you're allowing yourself to get too calm. You're not being aware enough to be able to direct your mind and keep your distance from thoughts that come into your mind, and properly handle the task. If you're having hypnagogic hallucinations, your awareness has faded a little. So yeah, if that's happening, just refresh yourself a little bit, reset, and go for it again. If you're falling asleep, just do it another time. If you just can't keep yourself from falling asleep, just stop and set your time for another time, because we're creatures of habit, right? If you allow yourself to fall asleep when you're meditating, your mind's going to see that as, oh, we're meditating, it's time to fall asleep again. So if that happens, excuse me, don't give into it. Just stop and set it for another time. Do it in a couple of hours when you're a little bit more awake, a little bit more present, so you don't start falling asleep. It's the same reason why people suggest not to do your homework in your bed, or not have your TV in your bedroom, because when people have their TVs in their bedroom and they sit down and they're laying in their bed watching TV, their minds, okay, we're in bed, it's time to watch TV. And so that becomes the brain's automatic response to getting in bed is, all right, let's prep for some television. And so it has a harder time getting to sleep, especially if it's become a habit. It becomes more difficult. It's just more problematic. Same thing with doing your homework in your bed. If you hop in your bed with a book, if your brain is already set to, if when we hop in the bed, it's time to go to sleep, well, It doesn't matter if you have homework with you. If you hop in your bed, your brain's going to be like, all right, time to go to bed. And so it's going to start shutting down. You're not going to be able to get your homework done very well in that sort of a mental state. So, yeah, state awareness is important for that kind of thing. So, yeah, if you start falling asleep while you're meditating, just stop. If you can't raise your focus and awareness to a level that'll keep you from dipping into that kind of trancey, sleepy state, just stop at that point and then just continue again later when you have a little bit more mental energy, when you're a bit more aware and focused. So yeah, if anybody have any more questions or thoughts or experiences, I think that's kind of touches on about everything I wanted to cover. So if anybody has any more questions or wants to say anything, go nuts. We'll talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. Fatima, were you here for earlier when I was talking about the vibration? Thank you, Xavier. Okay, so Fatima wanted to know if, so Xavier said, thank you very much for your time and love. You are very welcome. I love doing this. So, yeah, absolutely, man. And then Fatima asked, is it true that we experience our dominant thoughts? Careful. Let's see if I can answer this correctly. I have noticed when I started to get more and more aware of just what's happening in my head, right? I mean, a lot of crazy up here, right? I notice that there is an undercurrent. There's that. Excuse me. That there is kind of like your dominant thought processes. You know, I mean, you're talking in your head and visualizing stuff and thinking through things and being logical. But that there is also an undercurrent that happens that isn't always easy to identify or even recognize that it's happening. But the more the more you master your own mind and your thoughts, the more you'll pick up on this kind of weird undercurrent, and yes, you can have kind of a couple of layers of different thoughts happening that may be totally unrelated. You'll have your dominant thought, and then you'll have, another thought that's just kind of like this quiet little whisper. Typically, you don't even notice that it's there, but it is happening. And Izzy, please. And I always had thought that you just have one thing going on in your head at any one time. You only have one thought happening, and that's it. And it's just kind of like whatever I'm focused on, that's where my mind goes, and that's the thought that is happening, and that's it. And it turns out that's not totally true. So yeah, it's I think there's some substance to what you're asking, because your dominant thought stream is what you're experiencing at the time. It is what what you're focused on. But there also is, I guess, sub parallel processes going on. And again, I would be really interested to find out what any yogis or Buddhists have to say about that, because I have noticed that excuse me, that you can have two concurrent thoughts going at the same time. You have your dominant thought, and then you have a quiet whisper going on underneath that you don't typically even know is there, but it happens, and it's subtle, but you only bump into it when you're really oh, hey, Video Hope. You only bump into it when you're really, just when your mind is really quiet, and you can observe your different levels of mental processes of what's happening. Did that? I know I didn't fully answer your question, but that's been my experience. Did that help at all? Okay, cool. Oh, my dogs are barking. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, no. Hey, honey. You guys want to see my puppies? We got 4 of them. Let's see if I can get them over here. So, this lady right, the first one right here, that's Esri. She's a mama. The big guy right there, that's Professor. He is a huge Frenchie. Like, he's 31 pounds now. He's just gotten so big. And then there's 2 more over here. The camera's not going to stretch, but
They're very tall.
yeah, they're just absolute dolls. Okay, Fatima. Is sleep paralysis and MOBA state the same? They're related, but they're not the same. Sleep paralysis happens when you've got your waking mind, right? Anytime you go to sleep, there's a switch that shuts off control to your body. It's necessary, right? You have to have this happen. Otherwise, there are people that have neurological disorders where that switch doesn't shut off, and it can go both ways. So you need it to shut off so you don't act your dreams out. And some people have a disorder where it doesn't shut off. Sleepwalking is a mild form of this. There's another disorder, I can't remember the term, but people literally act their dreams out. And people have gotten really hurt because of it. Some people have bed braces to keep them from getting up and moving around. Not recently, a few years back, there's a story about a guy that woke up after he had jumped out, just shattered his second story window, jumped out of his window and landed on his front yard. And, that's when he decided that he needed to do something about it. But yeah, that switch is necessary. But it doesn't control everything. It doesn't shut everything off. Obviously, your heart needs to still beat. You still need to, breathe, and your eyes can move, and which is kind of a fundamental part in some more recent research. There's what's his name? Oh my God, I can't remember right now. I'll have to see if I can find it while I'm talking. So. He's got an app that you can download, but they're currently doing research where they use technology to get people into a lucid dream. And no, guys, down. They're The kitty just walked by. They're freaking out. So what was I saying? Oh yeah. So they use technology to help people get into a lucid dream. And what they do is they use scents, smells. It turns out that the sense of smell can bring somebody into dream awareness. But it has to be pre-planned, right? So you have to, associate a rose, right? The scent of a rose with a problem that you're trying to solve. So you would associate that and just think, yeah, when I smell the rose, I'm going to awaken in my dream. I'm going to become aware of my dream state. So they would just kind of set this intention, right? And as they would fall asleep, they would continue with the intention. Once they're asleep, the researchers would, wave the scent under their nose, and sure enough, it turns out to be a very powerful method of inducing a lucid dream. So you smell the rose, and suddenly you realize, oh yeah, the scent of rose means I need to stop and realize whether or not I'm dreaming. Oh, hey, I'm dreaming. Okay, cool. And then they can solve the problem that they've, whatever problem, right, that they're working on, whether they're trying to solve an equation for work or they're trying to work out a relationship issue or whatever the issue is. But the interesting thing is that they've found that they can communicate with the lucid dreamers through eye movements, because the eyes aren't shut off. That's why during rapid eye movement sleep, REM sleep, the eyes jot back and forth, because it's one of the few, the eyes, the heart, the lungs are the few connections to the body that don't get shut off at sleep time. So really fascinating stuff. They've been able to communicate, okay, jump your eye to the left twice for yes, 3 times to the left, or whatever the case is. They would come up with a scheme, like up and down means this or whatever. So they could literally talk to them in their sleep, and the research is, can you actually solve, like if you gave somebody a math problem, like what's 5 plus 3 while they're asleep in a lucid dream, then they can respond, move their eye up 7 times, 8 times. Whoops. And it turns out you can solve math problems. You can kind of give them a vague idea of what your dream is about, things that are in your dream. Really interesting research. Anyway, so that's the switch, right? That's the switch in your cerebellum that shuts off any control of your body so that you don't act your dreams out. Now, it goes the other way, which is sleep paralysis. This is when the brain doesn't fully shut the switch off. And, no. When the brain shuts the switch off before you're fully asleep. Sorry, I said that backwards. And so that can be terrifying, right? You're almost asleep and all of a sudden you can't move. So it's literally a switch in the back of your brain that shuts off any control to your body, so you can't move it. And yeah, it can be terrifying. But so sleep paralysis and the MABA state are related in that when you get into the MABA state, typically that switch shuts off, right? But the difference is that with sleep paralysis, you're aware that you can't move. In the MABA state, the switch is shut off, you can't move, but it's also put you into the void where it's not a problem. It's not frustrating that you can't move. You can't really even tell that you can't move. It's, the two things happen together at the same time, so you're not aware that you suddenly are paralyzed. So I would guess that it's possible to get into the MABA state, but not fully, to where you can still feel that you're kind of paralyzed. In fact, I've had kind of similar experiences where I've gone into sleep paralysis instead of the MABA state, where I was shooting for the MABA state, but I found myself in a paralyzed state. So I guess that's possible, but they're not the same thing. Closely related, though. Definitely closely related. Fatima says, "Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge." Absolutely. That's what knowledge is for, right? Sharing it. That's the whole point. I love it.
Carla, don't bother Papa.
Okay, so
So,
Miguel, is it Miguel?
come here.
Okay. So they say, so in MABA, your mind is awake, but it isn't necessarily aware of your immediate surroundings. Here, I'm going to move this window over here because it's kind of on the far end of the screen. 1 second. Okay. Miguel says, so in MABA, your mind is awake, but it isn't necessarily aware of your immediate surroundings, so it doesn't feel like you're paralyzed. Yes. Because the MABA state is mind awake, body asleep, but you've also taken that step into kind of into the void, right? That's what people have been calling it, into that kind of that nether realm that exists between being asleep and having a dream. That weird little area, because once you're in the MABA void, I mean, it's a void. It's a big black area that you just kind of tumble around in. So yeah, definitely at that point you're not you're not aware of your physical body, or if you are, it's a very minimal sort of reception. What is interesting, I need a drink, my throat's drying up. What I found interesting is when I'm meditating, okay, Miguel says pronounced. My jewel? Is that right? My jewel? Okay, gotcha. I'll remember that. All right, my jewel. This isn't necessarily about meditation, but do you ever plan on talking about remote viewing? Good question. So I am definitely skeptical, but I'm open. I've had some wackadoo experiences, and I've read a lot. Excuse me again. I've read a lot about the science, like the researchers that get all into it, right? Like the early what's that guy's name? The spoon guy. Oh my gosh. Oh, it's not coming. Anyway, yeah, I've read a lot about that early research, right? MK Ultra, all of that stuff, all the remote viewing research that they did back in the day, and if the reports are genuine, if these documents are legitimate, and the researchers weren't making stuff up to please their sponsors or whatever, then it's a really fascinating story to get into and really look at. I believe it's possible. Yeah, I went through a phase where I was trying to prove whether or not out-of-body experiences had substance to them. In fact, I was. This is kind of what got me into this. I lost my faith. I realized that my religion was just a bunch of BS and bunk. At least to me, from my perception, I thought it was just a bunch of BS. So I went on kind of this. Well, okay, if that's not true, then what is true, right? What is the reality of all of this? So that's what got me into meditation back in 2010 or something like that. So I really just kind of drove myself to be able to. I wanted to experience an out of body experience. It took me a long time. It took me years before I could, before I was at the point where I could exit my body 2-3 times a week. If I went down for like an hour meditation twice a day, I could exit 2 to 3 times a week, and I would run experiments. I would put face cards. I'd grab a thing of face cards and shuffle them up, and I would put the face card down on a table or put them facing outward on a window in my window. And then when I exited my body, I would go around to see what was there, like if I could see it. The bizarre thing for me, that this is my experience. This isn't saying anything, okay? Every time I tried to verify it, it was so crazy. It was almost like a psychedelic trip. Like if I went to look at the card to see what the card, whether it was a 2 of spades or a king of diamonds or whatever, when I went to look at it, it just exploded into like this fractal of all possibilities. It was so frustrating. I mean, I just couldn't get it to happen. I could not validate with 100% certainty that I was actually leaving my body. I talked to a bunch of people about this. A few people told me that it was because I was focused on it. It was because, like, when I got to the point that I was so focused on it and I was so waiting for a kind of a climax of revelation, that when I looked at it, I screwed it up myself. It was my own, like, overamped desire to prove whether or not a spiritual reality existed. Which I could see that, because when you're in that out of body state, it's how do I explain this? It's very easily bent and manipulated by your will. And if you want to, like, go out and navigate the world and investigate, you can't really put too much emphasis and thought into stuff, or it will, like, okay, for example, let's say I exit my body, and if I'm thinking too much, okay, I can make a door appear where there is no door. I can, you can conjure stuff. I can say, okay, I want a squirt gun. Suddenly you got a squirt gun. You can say, I want a door right there. Suddenly there's a door right there. You can say, okay, I'm going to walk through that mirror and end up in another dimension, and that can happen. So you can quickly go from...
Karma!
Hey, Izzy, will you take care of the cats? Will you grab her and put her back in your room, please? What was I just saying? Hey, guys. No. Leave her alone. Sorry. So yeah, it's really malleable, and if it will change the shape of what you're trying to investigate if you're not careful. You can quickly alter things, and that may have been what happened. Alex Romero says, "Good afternoon from Mexico City." Hey, welcome, Alex. Nice to have you here. So. Where was I going with that? what was I saying? Oh yeah. Okay, so I think like I guess that's a reasonable explanation as to why it just exploded into craziness, because I was so focused on trying to see what the answer was that does that make sense, that it just kind of like fractalized into all infinite possibilities of what could have been there, which makes sense in its own kind of weird dream logic sort of way. But yeah, I was never able to verify it or validate it. I do have some friends that say that they have, and a lot of the remote viewing research, uh, if it can be believed, if and I don't know. I've seen a lot of these guys give, their be interviewed and kind of give their reflections on what happened back then. Uri Geller, that's the guy with the spoons, right? Uri Geller can move the spoon. And I recently read a book called Annika. What's her name? Annika something. I'm gonna have to look this back up too. In fact, why don't I just look it up really quick so you guys know what this book is. And she's a journalist, and so similar to kind of my mindset, like very, very skeptical about the nature of a spiritual reality, but open. And she went around and interviewed all of these guys. She interviewed Uri Geller. She interviewed all of the research scientists that are still alive. A lot of the people that were involved in the studies. And I mean, really interesting book, because she's very pragmatic about her approach. Like, it's obvious that she doesn't want to get suckered into somebody else's BS, right? But even at that, the book is just fat. No, let me find the title of it if you guys want to know. Let's see here. I think it's called Phenomena. Annie Jacobsen. Yeah. And the book is called Phenomena. She also does a book on Area 51 where she goes and research and interviews all of the people that have worked there. That's a really interesting book too, because she goes through the whole history of what happened, how Area 51 even got created in the first place to build top secret aircraft for the military, and nuclear material research. So both her books, Phenomena and Area 51, Annie Jacobsen, fascinating. Anyway, in Phenomena, she ends up, the last couple of chapters, she goes to meet Uri Geller, and she brought her own spoon, and he, I mean, no chance to set anything up, nothing like that. And she swears up and down that he held the spoon up in front of him, and the spoon part just started wiggling around and moving all by itself, and it just snapped and fell to the ground. She's like, if there's a trick behind it, he's got me. I have no idea how he could have possibly done that, because she's the one that brought her own spoon. Like, she handed him her spoon. I mean, just really fascinating book. So so a lot of those guys were doing remote viewing, and if the research is to be believed, if you do it correctly, you can get pretty fantastic results. There's even one of the guys that new recruit. He started remote view. He sent them a letter. I've heard about the research you guys are doing. I would love to be a part of it. So they tested him, made sure he could get into deep trances and stuff. And there's this report where he was just remote viewing around, I guess flying around, and found an underground bunker, and went down into the bunker, went through some of the files, and said, Okay, so Nigel says, I moved the window again. 1 second, I can't read it past my microphone. Maybe you should look up Jeffrey Mishlove on YouTube. He's an interviewer that has a few interviews on remote viewing. His interviews, Lynn Buchanan, are interesting. I'll have to take that down. So, what's his name? Jeffrey Mishlove. Oh, he's the PK Man guy. Okay. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I'll check it out. Uh, yeah, I didn't put that together. I've not read the PK Man, but I've heard a lot about it. Alex Romero says, "Do you recommend some books to improve my meditation sessions?" There are a lot of really good books. Would you consider yourself, a fresh beginner, kind of practiced, more advanced, intermediate? Where do you see yourself as far as your personal meditations go? You're a beginner? Okay. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of books. Let me think. What would be a really good one to start with? There's a book by Bruce. It's super beginner stuff, but it gets kind of advanced too. Let's see, his name is Bruce Francis. He wrote Opening the Energy Gates of Your Body, Qigong for Lifelong Health. Excuse me. And yeah, he just kind of takes it from baby steps kind of stuff, nothing really intense, just some nice, just tapping into your own physiology kind of a book. It is peppered with some spirituality stuff, so if that's something that bothers you, just kind of look past it as you're reading it. But it's a good beginner book. It's mellow, right? Nothing too crazy. So that's a really good book. There's another one. Almost any beginner meditation book you pick up is going to have some good stuff in it. That one's a really good one though, because it meshes both sitting meditation, right, quieting the mind, laying meditation, and active body movement meditations, where you're coordinating the movements of your body with mindfulness and stuff. So it kind of covers everything, as far as like all the different kind of meditations that that are out there, or at least the roots of all of them. It's a pretty good book. Yeah, I could vouch for that one. I found it very interesting. A lot of good stuff in there. Yeah, if I think of any more, I'll let you know. Because I've read I've read a lot. I've read hundreds of meditation books and occult books and occult practices, and so I've got a bunch up here, but I'm not pulling anything out right now. I've got a whole bookshelf. I'll have to go look at it. Back to this remote viewing guy really quick. So let me just finish this story. So they took him in, and he went out for remote viewing kind of projection, and he found this underground bunker in this hillside, and there were he went down and found some different paperwork and brought that information back, like different people's names that worked there, the payroll, how many stories the bunker had, how many levels it was, right, where it was, all this stuff. So he came back and he said, okay, so this area, there's this big bunker, he kind of like gives this whole detailed list. So the team drives out there to verify it, and there's nothing there. Just flat land, like little mountain hillside. And they're like, okay, this guy is a total joke. Like, he pulled one over on us. Haha, good one, buddy. But it turns out, they find out just, fairly sometime right after that in fact there is a hidden military installation there. It has a secret entrance. It's got all this stuff. And so they got in contact with the commander over there and verified everything that he said was down there, like people on the payroll, different nameplates on different people's desks, the shape of it, how many rooms it had, how many stories it was, where the entrance was, all that stuff. So, I mean, that's pretty compelling if that's true, right? But on the same end, people can make shit up too. So it's so hard to, unless you can verify it yourself, it's so hard to believe some people. There are moments where it's undeniable, right? Where somebody brings information to you after having remote viewed that there's no possible way they would ever be able to have known, and then you verify it yourself. If it's something like that, that's a check mark for the plus side. But yeah, it's just that there are so many charlatans out there, so many bullshitters. Like, almost, I would say the majority, if not all, professional mediums, like on TV, or that have their 800 line, right, that costs $300 a minute or whatever. The majority, if not all, of those people are charlatans. And there are groups out there that specifically go out, to prove whether or not somebody's a charlatan. And you have your hardcore skeptics that won't believe anything but the false, or you know what I mean? There are different types of investigators, right? There's psi investigators that go out there and investigate people that want to know whether or not they actually have these abilities. Then you have the hardcore skeptics that go out there and will do anything in their power to prove that person is a bullshitter. And then you have investigators that are out there that are on the other side of the spectrum, that go out to prove, because they believe so frivolently and so hardcore, that they go out there to prove for sure that somebody has powers, whether or not they do, right? So you have kind of the spectrum of investigators, or of types of investigators. So you just kind of have to like sift through their stuff and determine what kind of investigator there are. But there are a lot of charlatans out there. yeah, it's sad. It's sad that people have this money-driven need to just, lie to people just to make it a little extra buck. So it's frustrating that that pool has become so muddied. But we're hitting kind of our time limit. I think we've gone over almost 20 minutes. But I appreciate everybody for coming. Very, very good questions. I'm glad we had this chance to just kind of communicate a little bit more on a more real time kind of basis. It was pretty cool. Fatima, good to see you, and Mijel, I'm going to remember that. I'll remember that pronunciation. Alex, thank you for coming. And there was who else was up here? There was somebody towards the beginning that said hi. Oh, Xavier, yeah. Oh, and Video Hope. So thank you all for coming. Very cool. I think I may do this more often. I thought this was kind of productive. All right, guys. So if nobody has any more questions, I'll give the feed a second, in case somebody wants to ask something really quick at the end here. But yeah, if nobody has any more questions, we'll just wrap this up, and I'll see you guys next time. So. Yeah, Mijel says thank you. Absolutely, very cool. Thank you. It was really cool to talk to everybody in kind of first person, even though it's chat video. It was still pretty cool. Yep. Fatima says, thank you so much. It's 1:20 a.m. here. It is? Oh, I'm sorry. I will let you go to bed. My apologies. Very cool. Thank you for attending, man. It was good to chat with you. All right, guys. I think that's it. Thank you so much for attending. This was really cool. Alex says, thank you. Thanks to you. I follow your channel since 2 years ago. Oh, thank you very much. I don't think we've chatted. I mean, if we have, it's been a while. But yeah, thank you. Very cool. I appreciate it. All right, guys. I'll see you guys later. Everybody have a wonderful day. Fatima, sorry. Go ahead and go to bed, bro. All right, guys. See you. Have a good night. Have a good night. Everybody else have a good day or whatever.